The moment blank, these two god-tier online gamers arrived in Disboard, a world where games decide everything, they used the knowledge from their old world to become the kings of humanity, a race cornered by the other races. Now kings, after winning over several races and gathering the key figures, they formally challenged this world's god. What the god prepared for Blank and the Otherworlders was a 3,500-kilometer-long Sugoroku game. The strange thing is, even though this was them playing a game against the god, the game's content had them slaughtering each other. However, Blank had long since seen through the purpose behind this game, and at the 11th hour broke through the task set by their own companion. Our No Game, No Life coverage has now reached Volume 8. Setting the main plot aside, the little games Blank and Steph played and the big games they've played are basically variants of things that exist in reality. Playing cards, chess, shiritori, Othello, Sugoroku, and video games. Come to think of it, video games should be what Blank is best at. Let's rewind a bit to the moment Blank and Jabril were about to start their game. Someone who should have been inside the game said this from outside it. I don't really get what's going on, but anyway, it's my turn. And so she prepared to act according to the instructions on the paper. The moment she moved, the water-filled backpack on her back let out this shout. Hey, could the porter be a bit more careful? You're not even a big shot and you dare take liberties with me? The nerve. Do you want to make an enemy of the sea? This person ignored the complaints from the backpack and just went on, step by wobbling step, toward her destination. At the border of Square 308, Izuna desperately tried to break the invisible wall, wanting to return to Square 296 to stop the game Blank was playing. Izuna did this because she knew they were playing a game that can only end with someone's death. Watching Izuna try so hard, the god had no particular reaction. She only told Izuna to hurry up and give a name and end all this. From the 7 souls the Old Deus holds, choose one and transfer the harm to the final square. Izuna had originally wanted to sacrifice herself to save everyone, Miko included. But afterward, thinking it over carefully, she realized, to save everyone, wouldn't it have been enough if nobody played this game from the start? So she began thinking, whose souls does the god actually hold? Sora, Shiro, Steph, herself, Ino, Plum, Jabril. That is indeed 7. But what about Miko? And the Old Deus herself? Doesn't that make 9? In other words, there must be something wrong with this rule. So that no one would be sacrificed, Izuna told the god she would never speak anyone's name. 72 hours later, after Izuna finished watching Blank and Jabril's task, she believed Blank can definitely break through this task she herself doesn't know how to answer. And she also believed Blank can let everyone finish this game happily. She also noticed Blank never lies to her, while Riku always deceived himself. And that difference is the reason the two sides are only a little bit alike. If Riku's strength was being able to deceive even himself for victory, then Riku's final failure was probably that Riku said the thing that must never be said. Anyway, having seen Blank's performance, Izuna waited at this square in peace for the game to end. After Blank and Jabril's game began, Plum and Feel's side stood off for a full 2 days. The reason they hadn't started the game, Plum demanded, was the various shocks of the Great War were affecting the outside of the game. The moment a shock came from the sky, a mass of spirit turbulence would appear, causing the spirit power of the entire Ruyan Island to restore at irregular intervals. Not only that, Feel, an elf with very high magical aptitude, had also fallen into a spirit-drunk state from these shocks and started harassing Karami. Plum hadn't gotten spirit drunk, but he knew that in this state he couldn't properly deploy his spells, so he also wasn't actively pressing Karami's group to start.
First Minister of Foreign Affairs, pardon the intrusion, there's an urgent matter.
Ino, who'd felt saved by the game's delay, didn't want to deal with this urgent matter. But once he heard the case demanded a meeting no matter what before the game begins, he let it through.
So, everyone, where am I?
The Siren Queen, Layla, leapt out of a water-filled backpack. But what shocked everyone wasn't the queen. It was the one who'd carried the Siren Queen here. Steph. According to Steph, her purpose in coming here was to make Lila appear here. So the fake really is you. Plum, whose head is about as cool as Blank's, had, even without 24 hours of memory, still seen through part of the Old Deus game's full picture. First, since Plum himself would never agree to a traitor who hasn't lost their memory, that means the traitor must have had no memory from the very beginning. And to have no memory from the start, you could only create a duplicate identical to the original. Second, since this group only holds 5 race pieces, and counting Blank as one person, there should only be 6 players. When I first read this part of the novel, honestly, I didn't quite get where in the rules Blank and Plum realized that joining the Old Deus's game requires staking a race piece. But reading further, I'd interpret it as Blank and Plum's memories from when they joined the Old Deus's game weren't erased, so Plum knew this game had 5 race pieces staked. Those pieces are Imanity's piece, Blank has the right to enter, the Dompier's piece, Plum has the right, the Flugel's piece, Jabril has the right, the Werebeast's piece, Izuna or Ino has the right, and the Siren's piece, Izuna, Ino, or Steph has the right. So counting it all up, there should only be 6 participants. I'll do a full breakdown of this a bit later. Here, just know that Plum, Karami, and Steph all knew part of the truth. Only Ino didn't. Oh, right, as long as they stake a race piece. Part of Karami's reason for attacking was that if Blank lost, then as long as everything of the Eastern Union became Feel's property, they could still protect their capital and not directly get over. Of course, it's also true that Karami wanted to beat Blank afterward and settle the score. Next, since Karami, Plum, and Ino started bickering among themselves again, Steph could only helplessly begin reading aloud the letter Blank had given her. To the sore loser, the creepy muscle man, and all you idiots present, if Karami and Feel lose, Blank collects all the stakes. Please, this way, if Ino loses, roughly one party will face a crisis of racial survival. That guy's demands can be completely ignored. With this one move, Blank flipped the whole situation. Plum had been able to demand all sorts of things because he could choose not to help and let the Eastern Union be taken by Karami. But now it's different. Once Lila is taken along with the Eastern Union, Karami, who doesn't need to conquer the world, naturally wouldn't care whether the Siren live or die. In other words, now that Lila is a stake, Plum can only help unconditionally. As for Karami's side, even if they wanted to withdraw, Plum's initial threat could force them to start. Also, for this round's greeting letter to Miss Karami and Miss Feel, Steph mustered her courage. What she gave Karami and Feel was a formal diplomatic letter, bearing the seal of the Kingdom of Elkia and Blank's formal signature. The text, in extremely proper handwriting, read, "Respectfully, dear friends, Miss Karami Zell, Miss Feel Nervalin, thank you sincerely for taking the trouble to come from afar amid your busy schedules. I can appreciate that preparing and mounting an attack in such a short time must have taken enormous effort. We sincerely hope to maintain a good friendship with you both from here on. Please forgive the brevity. With this letter alone, we express our deepest gratitude. Just look at you, the 205th king of the kingdom of Elkia, Sora and Shiro, with all our love." After everyone finished the letter, Steph added one last line. "I always believed every one of you would betray us. I love you all. Thanks for your hard work. And well done." Simply put, before his memory was erased, Sora had already calculated roughly what everyone else wanted to do. So he used their mindsets, laid the groundwork in advance, and waited to collect all the results at the end. With things at this point, since neither side had a way out, they could only start the game honestly. The game they'd play was a contest on a fictional field of who shoots the opponent first. As for the differences, 1, each side's stakes and participants. Entering the game on blank side was Ino, staking everything on the Eastern Union continent plus Lila. Entering on Karami's side was Karami, staking one elf race piece that Fiel possesses. The second difference was the state of the NPCs. To relieve stress for himself and for the extremely agitated Karami, Ino actually modeled those NPCs after Sora, meaning that although blasting those NPCs would lower their own energy, just being able to kill Sora in all sorts of flashy ways gave them incredible satisfaction. Meanwhile, Plum and Fiel, who didn't enter the game, would compete outside it. If Fiel could activate the countermeasure formula they'd prepared in advance, it would help Karami inside the game, and Plum's job was to stop her. After the game started, what nobody expected was that these Sora-modeled NPCs, in order to provoke people's rage, would put on all kinds of women's clothing on their own and go, "Everyone look, this is Lord Ino." Since it's a chest either way, obviously a sturdy, muscular male chest is better, right? While chasing Ino around. Honestly, this was already a kind of horror game. Against Karami, these NPCs switched to dashing men's clothes. So infuriating. Do you have no idea how capable and how cute you are? You don't actually think I'm the only one who'd pursue you, do you? Hearing Sora say this, Karami, who has never lost to anyone in cuteness, instantly went bashful. But then, that silk-like black hair, that snow-white skin like fine jade, even that flat chest, all of it is mine too. Yes, all this flattery was set up for provoking maximum rage at the end. Once Karami understood this, she too went berserk along with Ino. And so, the two's game direction became a contest of who kills more Soras. The two outside the game aren't worth much mention. Plum kept Fiel in a mirage state. That is, since when did you get the impression that you'd cast anything? Interestingly, even though all these people showed naked killing intent, every one of them still had a smile on their face. If Sora hadn't stopped it, no one would be playing games with expressions like these right now. So said Steph, smiling with relief. The instructions Sora gave Steph, besides everything that's currently happening, also added at the end, "Counting on you, Steph. Shut everything down. Make sure no one takes any losses. It's on you. And sorry for leaving you out." Because Sora believed this time it's a game where everyone must betray to reach the end. He could only leave behind the one he couldn't believe would betray. Steph. To Steph, this should have been something to be proud of, but she still felt a bit of frustration at not being able to join these people. After Jabril's task ended, Sora's group accepted Jabril's request. They ordered her first to hand over 2 dice, then to keep only 1 die and transfer all the rest. Now Sora's group had 13 dice total,
He really did forget, huh?
After finishing Jabril's task, Blank finally remembered that was only a game within a game. Ahead of them was still a painful journey. And moreover, Blank's first defeat left them wanting to do nothing but rest for a week. But helplessly, they could only keep going. On the next square, they rolled 11. Even though the next square was over 100 kilometers away, by Blank's calculation, at about 20 kilometers, they'd pass a commercial city where there might be a durable carriage or food. Hearing this, I suspect none of you noticed. Why would Blank, who'd already analyzed the randomness, make all 11 dice come up as just 1 pip each? The answer? They wanted to avoid all 3 entering the final square. By Blank's read of the whole game, if they stepped onto the final square normally, the Old Deus would die. To avoid that, Blank deliberately avoided rolling high. Anyway, in this stretch, they explained the game's full picture and deceived Steph into holding 5 dice. Blank, carrying 1 die each, kept slowly advancing. Of course, Blank did let Steph rest, because without rest, a 9-year-old Steph would genuinely keel over. At the commercial city, they successfully obtained a carriage. Since the road was within the kingdom of Elkia, their movement after getting the carriage went quite smoothly. Like Izuna, along the way they also saw that eerie task. From the 7 souls the Old Deus holds, choose 1 and transfer the harm to the final square. All right, from here, I'll unravel the whole thing at once. If you'd rather see how Blank strings it out, or the reasoning itself, check the novel. First, how did this game even start? The answer? Miko made a covenant with the Old Deus. Remember what I said in Volume 7, Part 1? Miko can only separate from the Old Deus upon obtaining the Suniaster or upon dying. Miko, who couldn't find a way to challenge the world, had planned to just hold on to the Old Deus's divine essence for life. But because of Blank's appearance, Miko's mindset shifted. First, Miko began hoping this god could be saved. Second, since the werebeast's race piece is currently held jointly by Miko and the god, Miko can't use the race piece as a stake. Given she wants the god to leave her body, but Miko herself must first die once, then how can she die without actually dying? The answer? Play another game and overwrite the original covenant. As long as Miko dies in a game the Old Deus also participates in, then the god can hold her soul, and after the game ends, return the soul to her body. Hearing this proposal, the god was about to agree and decided after winning she'd lend the divine essence to Miko. However, while the god was setting the rules with Blank's group, she suddenly realized Miko only wants to discard her, but doesn't want to give up the divine essence. At such a Miko, the god was furious. She felt betrayed again. So the god told everyone, after the game ends, whoever reaches the finish must void their own divine essence. Not only that, she also asked everyone, what is trust? Hearing such a common question, Sora answered without hesitation. Trust is doubt. This answer baffled the god, so she not only demanded Sora prove his claim, but also deliberately set a prisoner's dilemma trap within the game. Seeing the god do this, Blank, first not wanting the god to die, and second wanting to needle her a bit, proposed. If the traitor reaches the finish, then the divine essence destruction is voided. How's that? Since the god had just been deceived and thought this impossible, she agreed to the condition. On the other hand, the god thought if she won, she'd want to collect all the race's pieces and challenge the one true God. Because with the Suniaster, the questions I've had since I began existing, what is existence? What is the world? What am I? Might finally be answered. And because she wanted the pieces, she required participants to stake race pieces. From the participant side, the only ones with reason to save Miko and the god were Humanity and the werebeasts. The Dompiers and Flugel had no apparent reason to enter.
But Plum and Asriel, who wanted to give the gods a hard time, thought this. If they secured this god's cooperation, they could make this god serve as plenipotentiary. And then any Old Deus unhappy with her could only come and challenge, which would drag the Old Deus down onto the game board. To pull the gods down, they too agreed to stake their race pieces. As for Plum's other schemes, those were tacked on later. They weren't his original reason for joining. Anyway, they began discussing the Sugoroku's rules. Rule 1, the specially emphasized mass and duration of existence, was probably proposed by Plum. Rule 2, jointly decided. Rule 3 has randomness, so it was blanks. Rules 4 and 5 involve traveling together. Only blank would. So these two were also blanks. And these two also served to keep anyone from moving too fast. Rule 6 was probably joint, but note, this rule says players, while Rule 1 says participants. In other words, participants and players aren't all the same. The god isn't a participant, yet she is a player. Rules 7, 8, and 9 were also joint. Rule 10, task placement is in varying order, not random. Plus, squares 301 through 350 have identical tasks, so this rule was likely decided by the god. Rule 11 was highly likely Plum's, so he could force task takers to finish fast. Rule 12 is entirely favorable to blank, so it was likely all blanks. Rule 13, joint. Rules 14, 15, and 16 were all the gods. 14 concerns who gets the Suniaster, 15 creates the prisoner's dilemma, and 16 protects Miko. Addendum 1, joint. Addendum 2, blanks. Normally, neither blank nor Plum would agree to a player whose memory wasn't requisitioned, but to keep the god alive, they specifically duplicated Steph with her consent, which is how that rule came about. Let me sum up. Once sorted out, the participants should be blank, Izuna, Ino, Plum, Jabril, and Miko. The players are blank, the god, Izuna, Ino, Plum, and Jabril. The traitor isn't counted among the participants. The reason only blank, Plum, and the god discuss the rules is that Jabril does as blank says, and Ino presumably knew Miko's circumstances. The game these people played is Sugoroku. Blank's side staked 5 race pieces. The god staked the voiding of divine essence destruction. Blank's side had 2 win conditions. 1, any one of them steps on the finish. But then, although no one on Blank's side dies, the god does. And whoever steps on the finish last also doesn't know what wish they can have granted before the god dies. 2, a perfect victory. That is, the traitor steps on the finish. And then no one dies at all. The god had only 1 win condition. No one steps on the final square, in which case she gets 5 race pieces and can protect Miko's life. So either way, Miko never dies. Broadly speaking, apart from the god's motive for saving Miko, Sora had reasoned out just about everything. So the moment they entered this square, facing the nameless god and her task, Sora had the traitor, Steph's duplicate, answer it. Miss Miko. Unlike the other participants, Miko died at the very start. In other words, even if Miko's soul were killed in the god's hands, Miko wouldn't die. For this part, just think of it as proven anyway. It's easier that way. Don't overthink it. You'll enjoy the story more.
Asked this by Sora, the traitor was thoroughly confused. So, to convince him, Sora asked, "Do you have memories of setting tasks? Where's Lila? What about the letter I gave you?" Unable to answer, the traitor could only reluctantly accept his identity. Then, who am I? What becomes of me after the game ends? Did you only rely on me to win the game? Seeing the traitor's red, tear-filled eyes, Sora hurried to add that he would never accept the idea that since you're a fake, you're useless once it ends. Put more plainly, the memories of the traitor's journey would return to the original. Knowing he wouldn't vanish, the traitor endured his trembling, walked up to the nameless god, and answered, "Miss Miko." The next instant, the nearly weeping god took the traitor and teleported to the final square, returning Miko's Suniaster to the Old Deus. The demand the traitor made of the god had been preset by Blank's group before the game began. As soon as the traitor reached the finish, he'd automatically state the demand, "Let the Old Deus not die." So the traitor himself didn't know what to say to the Old Deus until he got there. And 1 second after the traitor stated the demand, the Sugoroku collapsed. Miko returned at full health, and the dice in Blank's chests vanished as their bodies reverted. As for the ghost form Ino and Plum, they thoroughly thrashed Karami and Feel, basking in delight. A Plum at full power left even a Feel using 7-layered spells completely helpless, which made Feel feel she'd only come to be a decoration. Anyway, just as they were enjoying themselves, "I'm burning! I'm gonna die! Blood! Give me blood, Your Majesty!" Restored on the spot, one of them was about to evaporate, and the other began violently coughing blood from spell backlash. Well, serves them right. The real stuff also successfully obtained the memories from within the game, and started making sarcastic jabs at Blank. Jabril teleported directly to the group, while Izuna was still on her way over.
"The game's over, right? Where are the masters?" "The game isn't over yet, because that child hasn't smiled. Why not pursue thine own victory? Why not let me die?" The Old Deus sitting on the lake surface no longer had the majesty of her first appearance. Now she looked only like a helpless little girl. True, Blank had broken through the trap set by everyone, the Old Deus included. But if they left the god as she was, she'd fall back into an inactive state. In other words, Miko's trap wasn't over yet. What's the point of killing strong players? Was that Great War really so much fun? To Sora's question, no one there answered. The god only asked again, "Why didst thou betray me?"
"All right, I leave this troublesome friend of mine to you." The instant Miko finished, everything the god had experienced flooded into Blank's minds. These memories included the god's birth, the god's creation, the god's suicide, and the god's meeting with Miko. Though it's true Miko deceived the god, it's also true Miko worried about the god. Miko had no idea how to save this friend, which is why Miko went so far as to drag everyone into it. All so this god could gain a smile.
Is it really okay to use such a simple game as your last one?
So saying, Sora walked over to the god, and then mocked her. "What was I born for? What do I live for? What kind of person is that? Besides being a god-tier idiot, what else could they possibly be?" Perhaps out of too much anger, the space suddenly shattered, and the scene switched to the sky where Blank first arrived in this world. "What are you angry about? Are you angry?" To an outsider, Sora was just bullying a little girl. But the truth was, Sora was enduring his terror of falling through the sky while desperately mounting a psychological attack on the god. "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! I bid thee be silent!"
Of course, Sora wasn't taunting for no reason. His purpose was to tell the god, if you hold everything in doubt, then why pursue answers at all? Next, Sora used himself and Riku as examples, telling the god that everything comes full circle, just as the word doubt eventually returns to certainty, just as the strong lose to the weak, and the wise have their foolish moments. Even the Old Deus are the same. Push it too far, and you'll be reduced to tears by humanity. Even what you are is the same. Go around once, and it reverses. If you take this hand, then to the God who was once alone, we'll give an answer. That is Holo. Holo is the name Blank gave the god, taken from the hollow in their own name. Blank equals hollow. Anyway, after Blank's whole string of explanations, Halu finally affirmed her own existence and had everything click into place. Assuming the highest rank has come full circle, the next time Halu will beat the lowest rank. Do your best. Whether it's questions or games, however many, we'll answer them all. What Sora didn't expect was that he'd regret this vow within minutes. A question. Therefore, I wish to ask the definition of me as Halu. I am merely the thing you all call Halu, assumed to be Halu. Halu is a curious little kid, endlessly asking very philosophical questions. In short, so long as it is defined that my observers recognize and call Holu by the name Holu, then Holu obtains definite proof of the existence of Holu. In other words, she can call herself Holu. Faced with this attitude of Holu's, Miko mustered her courage and asked this friend whether she had forgiven her. However, Holu hadn't forgiven her, because Holu can't yet assume what forgiveness is. Still, this god didn't feel displeased about her current changes. Next, as usual, the group all took a nice, happy bath. The less happy ones were probably just Karami and Feel, because besides losing the game, Blank also embellished their betrayal when reporting it to Elvengard, leaving these two with nowhere to go home to and having to live in Elkia. Of course, Sora didn't do this simply to hurt them. His real goal was to accelerate Elvengard's fragmentation. Finally, with Holu feeling very happy and Sora preparing to create a god-tier idol as foreshadowing, this volume came to an end. Volume 8 of No Game, No Life is, in my own creative history, one of the works I think I did best. It's also the only work I've made that required help from someone else. This episode really took a lot of effort, so if you liked it, please don't be shy about hitting like and subscribe. If you have the means, you can also join as a member or support me via the payment link. All your support is what keeps me creating. All right, let's keep the game going.